What's up, dudes? Get Matt in here real quick. We'll get this thing kicked off. See if I need to send him. There he is. What's up, guys? Hey, what's up, buddy?
What's up?
Not much. I think we just kick this off. So I made a post earlier. There's been a whole bunch of people that are talking about like one-man CQB, two-man CQB, and then one-day schools and two-day schools. CQB seems to be this big topic, right? So I'd like to spend less time breaking down how to deal with doorway than like what is building clearing. When are you clearing a building, and when are you doing CQB? And are they the exact same thing, right? So it seems to be like structurally driven, like, oh, we're in the house, we're doing CQB. Well, you were doing CQB on the way to the house, like as you walked up to it. And like I say, if you're clearing a commercial yard, like you've probably cleared plenty of commercial yards with trucks, trailers, piles of barrels and garbage and stuff all over it, and you go through on a canine search, or you go through just to clear a burglar alarm call, that's still CQB in my point of view. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, the distances can be almost the same as some stuff you deal with indoors. And we go in some of these commercial buildings and they're 50, 60 yards,
Right.
some places inside of these places, just it's no different when you're inside, when you're outside.
Yeah, we cleared. Did you ever make it to the building we had over in Tempe where we had it for a few months and we were just doing explosive breaching in there and just experimenting? I know I had the Tempe guys over there, but it was a call center. It was 250,000 square feet. So it had a huge office complex on one side, like offices.
Yeah, we did.
And then the other side was just open. It was just a gigantic 150-yard long like room with little cubicles that were about 4 feet tall.
Oh, yeah.
Literally a cubicle farm. So like that's still CQB, but it seems to be that we get confused about like, is it being sold to patrol officers specifically? I'm talking from the LE side, and we can talk about the civilian side too. Is it being sold to patrol officers that you need to learn how to do this one-man, two-man, team-based CQB to clear a building on an alarm call? It seems like that's how it's sold to me. Like better techniques, better this, better that. And in the end, I think it really depends on why we're there, right? Like clearing in a building on an alarm call that's been holding for 45 minutes to an hour is different than entering a building on an active shooter, is different than clearing a house on a search warrant, than just going to a house on a call and interacting with people in the living room and then having to go, well, he's in the back room. And you'll go to the back room to talk to the son or the dad who's drunk and whatever's going on. You're not CQBing your way to the room, generally. I don't see people do that, right? It seems like we only have this mentality of CQB when we're in there searching or, air quotes, clearing a building. And then I would ask people, like, of all the times you've ever cleared a building, how many times did you shoot somebody versus how many times did you actually make contact with someone who was either lawfully there or unlawfully there, and how did you deal with them then? You know what I mean? Like, it seems like the focus is on shooting, but that's the people that say shooting's not important. Like, we're always fucking shooting people when we do CQB training, right? But shooting's not important. We got to do CQB. But like, you're not really learning about the building and the structure and the construction and target analysis from the outside. And do they actually go into those things? Maybe that's just kind of a long intro question to it, but what are your thoughts?
There's so many different variables to it. I mean, you could spend, you were talking about earlier about like a school versus a class, a certification, and all these other things that get thrown around for it. And, I know the thought process of your agency and your, the guys over there on what a school actually means. You can fail a school, right? If you complete a class, it doesn't mean that you necessarily learned everything that you needed to learn there. It's just that you attended it and you got a certificate of completion. So there's so many different sides to it, from, a team-based aspect to the patrol officer standpoint. I trained patrol squad the other night, and just that's the biggest question is why are we here, right? Because that really is kind of the starting point of what's going to determine what happens, you know. And there's just obviously there's so many different directions it can go from there. And I mean, I went the first agency that I worked at, we got very little training on that stuff, right? We got very little training in the academy. You know, and I went to Aaliyah when it was called that back then. We didn't get a lot of that stuff. So you find yourself working weekend graves someplace and you're trying to figure it out, right? You're relying upon guys that have already done it in whatever training or background they have, and you're picking those things up and you take it along with you until you get more training or something else comes along, right? Or you get some formalized instruction, you know, on it. And then obviously now with the internet wasn't what it was back then. Now here today, you can go all over the place and take all these different classes, single, multiple person, right? Like there's so many of them. It's you know, there's a lot out there.
So I mean, it's not confusing to me. I get it. Like I get the business model. I get why people would want to attend it. Again, like you brought up, that's our philosophy, right? There's a school and then there's a seminar. Like you can attend a school like our school and fail it, and you don't get anything. Like you were not able to graduate. You are not able to go on to any level that comes after this. And I've seen a lot of schools. That's why I use the word, because it seems to be the way it's referred to. A lot of training that involves either no shoot, like no dry fire, basically just dry guns. And then sometimes if the instructor and the people are able to support it with their insurance and they have the ability to support that level of training, they'll move on to sims. A lot of that's actor dependent. Like there's that goes into scenarios and all these other things, but at least they get to sims. But there's very few that I've seen where they actually transition to live fire. And I have heard people make the excuse that, well, there's a lot that goes into putting on live fire training. Yes, I know that. There's a whole lot that goes into putting in live fire training. But without that experience, and without the baseline beginning of it, can you shoot? What are you able to do in these circumstances with a real gun, not a paintball gun? Because you'll do wacky shit with a Sims gun that you can't do with a real gun.
Oh yeah.
Are they actually learning the whole idea of CQB? And I still get confused on it. To me, it doesn't have anything to do with the structure. It has to do with the confinement, like the close quarters, the distances. So entering a room and finding a threat is no different than walking through a parking lot and having a guy crouch down by the front of the car and jumping out and shooting at you. It's no different than walking around the corner of a building and having a guy 5 feet away with a gun who bailed out on a stolen and is running from you, right? You're chasing him, you lose him, you go looking around this corner and there he is waiting for you with a gun. The angles are the same. The whole idea of every part of it in my head for some reason is the same thing. And we said before, it all ends up coming down to a shooting problem. And do you shoot? Do you not shoot? Do you get seat cover? Do you move over here? And if you do shoot, are you hitting what you're aiming at? But like like if you've attended, and this is for like the students, if someone watches this later on, feel free to comment all you want. But if you've attended a CQB school, if it was a 1 day, 2 day, 4 day, 2 weeks, right? Did that put everything together for you? And would the instructors, this is the separate part for the instructors, would you take those students who passed your class and do live fire runs with them? Would you let them do a live fire run with you? And I think many will be no. Well, then what are they missing? What do they not have? What did you not have time to teach them? What confidence do you not have in them to actually be able to do a live fire hit run with you? And what's actually needed to do that, just to get to the live fire in the house part? I know all the safety protocols that go in, and then like the depth of safety that some people go into that is for good reason, because it is that difficult. But it seems to be easier for students / participants who have a really high understanding of gun handling. They just do that part easier. You know what I mean? I'm sure you've had plenty of people in building clearing who are at the baseline level. They just are either still in the academy or they're just out of it with whatever minimal training they had, and their gun handling, once they go in the house, like, although nothing in my mind has changed, once they go in the house, it's like this thing they got to hold out there, like at any moment this thing could fire its rocket jets and start pointing at shit, and I just don't want to let that happen. And that confidence isn't there. I don't know, I'm kind of on a tangent, but like that's my main point. What's different about making a room entry versus rounding the corner on a busy, like in a mall? What's different?
I think it just comes down to the environment. You know, that's like you said, everything, the distances can be the same, the complexity of the shot, the lighting conditions. I mean, a lot of that stuff can be very similar.
Mm,
And it, like you said before, at the end of the day, it's inside versus outside, right? There might be different backdrop considerations and things like that that are going on with it. You know, if I'm outside and I'm in a parking lot and I'm looking behind cars, obviously that's going to be a little bit of a backdrop than if I'm in an apartment and three of the walls in that apartment are shared by other occupied apartments, right? So that environment really just, that kind of is the thing that sticks out to me, is just the environment. Um, and especially if I can control it too. And obviously sometimes you don't get to pick, right? The patrol officer responding to the call that's in progress, they might not get a lot of say in that environment, you know?
yeah.
So they got to just be able to take the information that they can, you know, and be able to try and make decisions ahead of time. Because when everything gets compressed, like that's all these videos that we see recently, right, where things just go completely crazy. You know, and sometimes that can't be avoided, but oftentimes there seems to be little clues, kind of breadcrumbs along the way that, hey, we could have moved back to this space before we did this. Maybe we shouldn't have opened this door because there were signs that there was something wrong on the other side, right? There's a lot of lead up, it seems, to some of these things that happen that we're not really following kind of those old school principles of searching. If we're truly searching, right? Looking for someone, looking for clues ahead of time so that we're not meeting them face to face and then having that exchange right there.
So I have an answer to it. I mean, I have my own thoughts on it. And I think this is just to be quick on this part, the only difference in being internal to a structure and being external to a structure is my ability to maneuver an egress. Like you're channelized, but that can still happen outside too, right? The last one in New Mexico, was that New Mexico where they were following the dude and he just ain't listening? He ends up going into the store and everybody's there. So
yep. Yeah.
that's still CQB. It's close quarters again. It doesn't have anything to do with the movement. It's the close confined quarters. And like we really harp on subject, venue, and environment, right? Like if we're CQB, like the whole idea of it isn't understanding how to deal with a damn doorway. It's why are we here? What are the likely things we're going to deal with? And what are some of the dangers that we can have, especially if we miss, right?
Oh,
So if
yeah.
you're clearing a building, you get a burglary alarm call. Patrol officer shows up, an alarm call. It's 1:30 in the morning, freaking lightning and thunder. All the alarms start going off. 99% of the time they're going to empty and you're not going to be able to get in because there's no forced entry. So let's say they find that forced entry on one and they decide, oh, I'm going to clear this. Like, we don't know if there's a subject or multiple, right? The venue is a closed commercial business. So even if we shoot through the walls, are they shared with anything else? No. It's no different than being in open air. If you miss, it's going somewhere and much further, generally, has the capability of going much further than it would inside a structure, right? So it's inherently safer for the public to be shooting inside than it is to be outside, even though most of our trajectories in this world are down towards the ground. Like dudes aren't firing pistol rounds unless they're like completely crazy, sending them 500 yards down the street. They're landing, 15 to 20 yards behind an individual that's being shot at. But like when they entered that space, I think I would like guys to put more attention into what am I seeing and what am I capable of? Because I know a bunch of our guys have talked about it before. Like sometimes you don't get to shoot back, right? You just
Yeah.
can't because of the way it is. But when they went into that in New Mexico, when they went right into the front of the store, when they're presented, and I think you've seen this on the range a lot, and especially if you can do force on force with guys or if you do it for real, people's whole world goes down to the one thing they're seeing, right? So instead of entering structures like that, being dead focused on the target and not being aware that there was like 20 something people all around in there. And I don't think anyone got hit. Did anyone else get hit in that?
So there were two videos. I don't remember which one was which. There was the open air one, and then there was the grocery store. One of them, two people got hit. I think the grocery store. I don't remember which
That's
one.
the thing
I watched.
don't remember.
Yeah,
But that's the more important part. like we're just sending bullets all over the place,
Yeah.
right? And that is a known. Like you're following him. Yes, you are reacting to a thing, but it's not a startle. It isn't like, holy crap. It's we're actually following a guy we think is armed, and it can go that bad, right? James is in here saying nobody got hit in the store, which is the one that I think is crazy, right?
Right.
We're internal to a structure. Nobody gets hit with a bullet. I've been internal on structures with bullets flying all over the place and no one get hit. It's just, it isn't because you're inside, it's just because it's pure dumb luck.
Yeah.
Got to try to circle back to what the original thoughts are. The idea of like building clearing and trying to treat it like CQB, I think goes against what it really is for law enforcement. I want to hit that one first, right? So the LE dude clearing a structure on a burglary. You and I choose to make a better decision where I'm like, hey, I've got a guy available. I'm going to wait for him to show up, and we are both going to go in and clear the structure. Can we dominate that entire structure, just you and I? No, right? Do we need to spend epic amounts of time pieing every single doorway and exposing ourselves to more and more and more, right? As we slowly do these things and try to clear it without any understanding why we're there. Like, what would be the goal? To find out if it's occupied. Would you agree? Like, to find out if someone's in there.
Yeah. Why are we there? You know?
Yeah, we're there to see.
It's like you said, is it the unlocked door or is it the brick thrown through the window? Right. Like those are two different things, especially if the business just closed 10 minutes ago, you know, versus the 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, brick going through the window. It's a lot different, you know.
And that could be criminal damage. Nobody could be in there, or somebody could be in there.
Yeah.
And they could be in there ripping copper. They could be in there freaking stealing documents, stealing computers. Who the hell knows what they're in there doing? It doesn't really matter. But what are you actually going in there to do? You're going in there to find out if it's still occupied. But why, right? Like, does it even do these schools even go into why we're doing it? Why do we need to know if it's occupied? Do we have to arrest the guy? And if we went and searched it and missed him, because tell me that's never happened before, right? Never missed anyone on a search.
Right.
We're now turning this building back over to the owner, who said, yes, if you find someone in there, I want to prosecute. So that's the only reason the police should be going in. If they go, no, just leave it, I'll deal with it when I get there. And you go, oh, no, we got to clear it to make sure it's safe. But you don't have a lawful reason for going in there, in my opinion. The homeowner, if the business owner says, yes, you know, I want to make sure if it's safe and I will prosecute anyone you find in there, then you can go in and start looking for people. But if he's just like nah, I don't want to prosecute anybody, just go in there and make sure it's safe. Those are two different things.
Right.
We're now limited on how we can even interact with somebody if you do find them in there. And I would suggest you don't do it.
It's almost,
you don't want to prosecute.
Yeah. It's almost like the investigation is ongoing before you go in, and then even once we go in, because we might go in under a certain assumption and we might get 2 rooms deep into the structure and then realize that this is something else. Right. And especially then there's always that consideration too, is that what is the person who owns this structure and the person who has the rights on it, what do they want, right? Because at the end of the day, we're here for them, right?
Yep.
And if they are just like, nope, this happens all the time, we're not super concerned, you can leave it, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Well, like you said, there's the legal side of that too. You know, why now at this point, legally, does that fall under one of those exemptions to be able to go into that structure, right?
Well, I would say it doesn't, because the owner of the property, the actual person was standing, has told you not to worry about it. If you had no contact with them, I think for the good of society, the assumption would be, yes, they want us to do this. And again, at that point, we're going to clear to see if someone's broken into the place. If you go in there and you find a giant weed grow, right? A, it's legal now. I don't know if it's illegal or not.
Yeah.
But if you did, that ain't what you're in there for. And you now have to, if you want to deal with that, that's an entirely separate thing. This is why the cop part gets complicated.
Yeah.
The whole idea, but this, and my reasoning behind having this conversation, because I think people need to have a better understanding of why they want to learn what they're doing, right? Why do you want to learn these techniques? And I agree that every American citizen should have access to them, right? The basic idea of what you want to do to protect yourself and your property, right? The idea that you came home and found your own house broken into, right? Front door's kicked in, you came home, your ring didn't go off, whatever. Family's in the car. I'm not going to go in and clear my own house with my family sitting in the car. That's just me. Maybe I'm a big chicken, but I ain't leaving them alone to go and clear my house for my property that I could give a shit less about, right?
Right.
So
when you go in and the guy jumps out the back window and then runs around to your car because they're looking
hey,
to get out of there.
All the millions of different things that can happen.
Yeah.
I'm just not doing that because there's nothing in there that's worth me going in and endangering them, myself. I could care less about the idiot breaking into my house. Now, am I going to go drive away and hide around the corner? No, I'll keep an eye on the front of it, but I'm not going to separate from the valuable things in my life. If then I've had guys, a lot of this came from messages I got. I've had guys message me, well, what if I run to the store and I know my family's home and I come home and I see my front door kicked in? There's a lot of assumption that goes into that. And I'm like, if it's clear, like you have busted door frame, it's kicked in like this, this is the question I asked them. So it's obvious. You didn't like come home, hit your garage, you go up in there and you come in, your wife's screaming in the back. That could be one of the kids fell down, is bleeding. The freaking sink is overflowing. There's a million things that go on with it. But for this particular purpose, it is a bad guy. He's kicked in the door and you just arrive home and you see dust still in the air. You can see the door frame is kicked in and you hear your wife screaming in the house or your kids screaming in the house. At that point, this is where like this building clearing idea and then an assault separate from me. Whose safety are you worried about? Are you worried about your safety or the safety of the people that you're going in there for, right? And that's how we talk about like with active shooter with the dudes. It gets active shooter, all these big fantasies guys have. At that point in time, it is public safety, not your safety. So these techniques of slow pies and doing all this are for your safety. And now again, the priorities are out of whack, right? Yeah. So are you going to go in and pie every corner of a structure you intimately know, your own house? Are you going to slow creep and do all these things because of some fantasy bad guy who's your wife's in danger, but he's just waiting on the corner for you? Or are you going to go in there and confront and identify the threat that may end up not being a lethal force issue? Does that make sense?
Right. And
like for that same
it
scenario.
Is. And to me, so I had a similar experience of that when I was a very inexperienced graveyard cop. And there was no CQB. We didn't do any of that. We probably had one of the worst foot breaches on a commercial or like a hard skinned, like a apartment door that you could ever have. But we had to get inside, right? We didn't have equipment. A lady was in there and had stabbed her boyfriend and was holding their kid with the knife. And so at that point, it's like you said, that priority at that moment is to help that guy and get him some medical attention and separate her from that child. And if you looked back at that, and I don't remember if we had cameras or not, and you'd look at that and be like, well, there was no CQB used. You were terrible, right? You didn't pie. You didn't do a muzzle switch at the T intersection between the bathroom and the bedroom. You didn't cover plate to plate each other. And it's like, well, we didn't do any of that because we had to just go directly to where they were. And, one of us is making a decision. Are we about to possibly use lethal force on this lady in front of this small child? And then here's our guy who's been stabbed multiple times, right? What help do we need to get him? It was a very different situation, and we didn't use any of that stuff. And we ended up having to close and go hands-on with her and separate her from that child and then do medical attention on him and help him out. But there was none of that. The breaching wasn't correct, right? Like if that was a scenario in a school or a class or whatever, we would have failed the breaching portion and we would have failed the CQB portion. But at the end of it, though, we had a small infant that was unharmed. We got medical attention to the guy who had a collapsed lung, and we took her into custody with the minimal amount of force, right? For as crazy as that situation was. So again, there's all these scenarios, man, that people seem to have sometimes. Like, I don't know if I'm just kind of turned off to it, but I just kind of look at it as like, again, why are we here? What's the problem? What do we need to solve? Who's the most in danger at this point, right? Where do I fall on that scale as either the police officer, the specialty officer, if you're on one of those, right? Because that changes it, because now you have different equipment and resources and capabilities, right, to steal from suspect venue and environment. The other side of that is, hey, what do we have to deal with this problem, right? You know, you have to look at where you fall on that scale, or if you're just a civilian by yourself, right? And making a decision at that point of what's it going to be. And at the end of the day, it might come down to getting through the structure as quickly as possible to solve that problem. So is that wrong?
No, I
Right?
don't think it is at all. And that's kind of the point of it. Like, I think CQB has been overly sexied. And I'm going to make a comparison. I've played video games, and they're fun. If you don't do all these techniques in the video games because there's 87 other people trying to kill you, you're going to get killed, right? But no, I'm not aware of anyone here in the continental United States that's taking over Fallujah. Like, even a normal search warrant's not that way. If you hit a house and there's 6 bad guys in there with guns who are actually legit bad guys and not pussies,
you're probably going to die.
Fucked. Like, it's just, that's a bad hit, man. Like, oh shit, I guess this sucks. And even if you're doing it for real, like, there's all these layers of things that we use to cheat. But in the end, like, the concepts, the basic concepts, why are you there? Well, I want to find out if it's occupied. Then go in there and see if anyone's in there. Well, that's dangerous. Then don't do it, right? Like, is something telling you that it's going to be that dangerous? Then find another way to deal with it. If you're pieing around and you think this guy's in there waiting for you, the boogeyman's in the corner and he's waiting for you with a gun, which I guess can happen, right? I'm not aware of the last time it happened. Most contacts, now that we have the glory of the BWC and we get to watch hundreds and hundreds of these constantly, where we are contacting people on entries and search warrant, not search warrants, patrol building clearings, right? They're going through and just clearing, hey, there's a guy right there, right? I just did one on my patrol shift on Sunday. Lady's like, I came home, there's a guy in my bed in my trailer. And we were like, well, that's illegal. Let's go in there and get him out. And the patrol guys went up, and they're at the door, and there's a window here. And it's just one of those things from the outside. You're like, well, that window doesn't go to anything we can see. So stop talking at the door and just go in there and let's clear this. So we go in, we clear the front part, and they're like, hey, let me see your hands. I can hear them behind me. I turn around, there's a guy in the bed and a girl in the bed. All right, here, do this. Can you hear me? Do you understand? You're under arrest, blah, blah, blah. We get them up, they come out. I say, the one patrol officer's got his gun pointing down the hallway of the trailer with no light on. I said, would you put a light on for that real quick? He goes, yeah, and he turns the light on. So I start taking apart stuff in this room. We start clearing, going forward, and I see the guy's legs sticking out. Another guy, now a third guy in this back bedroom with his legs sticking out.
Who would have
thought? And I just go, hey, dude, it's the police. You're under arrest for trespassing. What's your name? And he tells me his name, and I said, okay, roll over, do what you're told. We're not going to hurt you. But we didn't like, hi, and do all this. It's just, let's go find out if anyone's in there. Because in the end, however they act is what you're going to end up dealing with. And I don't care what school you went to or how fast you think you are, you're not going to beat the fucking guy who just starts shooting at you. It's just not happening. So stop. You got to find them. You got to identify them. I'm not telling people to run through the house. I'm saying use your senses. Go in there and just start looking for people and deal with the problems that arise. Maybe that's just too... Maybe that's one of those things where if you've done something enough and you've seen enough things and there's little things that you're capable of, you and I are capable of noticing, the breadcrumb trails, right? The smells, like tweakers smell a certain way, right? There's the little things where you can see doors, the way the way the doors in the house are, and you can hear stuff going on that give you a clue to deal with it. I still don't go crazy with some sort of magical technique. It's like play it as it comes and kind of just react to whatever it is, because I've been in thousands and thousands of rooms with hundreds and hundreds of people on search warrants. I haven't had to shoot any of them, but I've had upwards of 9 people in one room. For now, you're just going, okay, everybody, hello, and they're like, I'm just here for a minute. You know how that all goes. All right, everybody, just sit tight for a minute because we got stuff to do. And it's I don't know why it gets so complicated.
So there was one up here earlier from Zach, who I know, and Zach and I have had discussions about these types of things. And a lot of it, like I talk about, like when we first started, everything was A, B, C, D, right? Here's your steps. Here's your flow chart. Everything has a flow chart, from everything from decision making to pursuits to shooting to use of force, right? We have the flow chart because the flow chart is easy to give people. But as we have seen, right, in some of the classes that I've gone to, and now that everyone's kind of waking up to the fact that real life is not a flow chart, right? You could go from step 1 to 7A about that fast.
Yep.
And you have to be able to adapt to it. So law enforcement training has been mimicking that, right? So now that things are starting to change, and if you go to training outside of departments, at least the last few trainings that I've been to, it has been more principle based and kind of just, it's more broad. And some guys really don't like that because they want to be told at the end of their run, hey, you did great. This area here, you're definitely supposed to use this technique. And at the end of it, now a lot of these ones are, yeah, you did. How do you think you did? Well, and they're like, well, no, I want to know what the instructor thinks, because a lot of it is changing so much. And now we're starting to train officers as well. Like with this patrol squad that I just worked with, I gave them the suspect, venue, and environment thing. Cause I, have gone to a bunch of outside trainings and finally got to hear that. And I'm like, where has this been my entire life that one of your people came up with, right? I'm like, this is super simple. I'm going to steal this, right? And give credit to it, but I'm going to start hijacking it. And the patrol guys loved it because it was super simple to be able to apply it. But it's not this, step-by-step process that they've been taught previously with certain things. It's more broad for them and all the different things that they come across. So I think that the training is starting to change, but especially for the law enforcement side, I try really hard to get guys to understand, like, sometimes there's more than one answer. And especially in a training environment, you could have, there's so many shoot houses here where we live, right, to be able to train at. We all know the secrets. We all know how to clear your shoot house. We all know how to clear the one that I have at my agency. We all know how to clear the one up north, right? Everybody knows what works best in those ones. But yet you could bring in 4 guys, 4 separate groups of 4 guys, and they'll all do it differently. So who's more right than the other? It doesn't become that, right?
Yep. And you'll see, I've seen guys run through your house after they've been there. The first time we were ever at your house was like, this is great, because nobody knows what the fuck is going on.
Right.
And now they actually have to go through it. But it took about a run, and everybody's like, oh, okay. Because it's all basic.
We're the worst cheaters ever, right? Like, that's every single one. If you go to some place, like, we're the worst at it. As soon as we know, hey, I know that this door closes this way, and I can see that, and I can see that bungee. I can see the out of play sign, so I'm gaming it as I go. And really, the last great endeavor is the cold hit, right? Yep. Where nobody knows the floor plan. And really, that's the one where you actually get to see, hey, does it work or does it not?
Yep.
Is when we don't really know where we're going. As we take baby steps, we're starting to figure it out. But, hey, I thought this was a closet. It actually goes into another corridor that's got 10 rooms attached to it. So it's, the scenario-based stuff is just and really being geared on the scenario. It's just not, I don't know. To me, it doesn't draw me in that much. And I hope.
Good.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
That's where I think you end up seeing, like, when the people hit a different place, or when they don't know what's going on, or especially when you shut the lights off and start changing doors. That's where you find out when guys actually understand the concept, right? Guys in classes, or if you see an instructor demonstrate something, I would hope the instructor doesn't expect you to do that thing all the time that way at that point, because there's other ways to do it. They're just showing you, hopefully, ways to deal with concepts to deal with, things you might think of if presented with something, just to give you like a little bit more in your Rolodex of ways to deal with it. But that's where I think you start understanding or seeing guys that actually understand the true concepts and just the basic principles. Like, I don't know how long ago it was, I stopped thinking about, I should be doing this. And if I'm going down a hallway and you ask me, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to go down there and open that door. That's all I give a shit about in this moment. I'm going to go down there and I'm going to open that freaking door up and find out what happens. Because I don't need to sit there and overthink, like, and do all these movements. I'm just going to go down there and open the door and figure out what happens. And if there's a closed door here and an open door here, I'm probably just going to go down there and go in the open door. Like, it's CQB to me seems to be, like, the more experience you get with it, the more you understand how not to interfere and make other people's lives hard in CQB. Just go do your thing and stop changing your mind all the time, right? Don't try to do some kind of wazoo step because you have support, right? When you have more people to do it, like all 20-man CQB does is make less shit for you to have to worry about. You're going to get one room and then the house is going to be done. If it's
Yeah.
two of you, just find the one thing and trust that that guy is going to cover you. And the more you learn about like broader CQB and the bigger concepts, if you understand them as a singleton, going in there, you realize there's all kinds of problems I have to have, and it might depend on where I stand and how I move in this place that are going to give me an advantage. But if you already understand the basic concepts of big team CQB, I think you're just better off knowing what to do to help yourself. I think you kind of fuck everything up if you try to learn how to do CQB by yourself and then go mix that in with a team, because now you are going to be the guy who's running around trying to do everything, and that is annoying because it's like this little freaking chicken running around with his head cut off, and you're like, I don't even know how to deal with you, dude, and now everybody's adapting to you.
Yeah, I look back on when I first started and started on SWAT and not having military background, having shot quite a bit, but not understanding how to apply shooting to that environment. I really struggled. And especially when it came to the live fire portion, that was a new animal for me. And I had quite the growing pains to go through in order to get through that stuff. So looking at it from a beginner's standpoint, and maybe this is something that, you know, new officers go through or newer guys on a team or specialty, you know, where they're working with other people that might be more experienced, especially, you know, stepping into an environment where everybody can read the body language except for the new person. That's probably pretty difficult, right? Like it's easy for me because I can look at whoever and I know based off of their body language what they're thinking and what they're about to do because I've stared at them 1,000 times and asked that question, or I've learned to look at that, right, and see what they're doing. But when you're that newer person, and again, like whether you're the new guy on a SWAT team or a specialty or you're a new patrol officer and you're trying to figure out where you fit in, I remember those feelings of like, I just want to get this right. I just want to get this right. I just want to, you know, get past this block of training for the day and not be the one who messes everything up. But right, more experienced people, what do they often do? They set up points of failure in order to see if you grow from that or if it continues to be a limiting factor. And that's exactly what they did to me. They knew that I was smart. They knew that I could figure things out. They purposely made things go wrong in order to put me in positions to where they wanted to see, is he going to think through it or is he just going to resort to what's in a book someplace? Right. And that was done live fire. So, and that was before we were suppressed as well. So, you know, you're getting a small concussion every single time along with it. I try to look back at that and try to remind myself what the newer person has to go through and how can I deliver that information to them when I am in that instructor position that they can have it and pick it up better than I did. I think that's kind of my end goal of it, especially if, you know, the live fire thing too, you know, on the commercial side of it, I can probably name, man, on one hand, people that do live fire for law enforcement in those environments, one of them being here. And that's a huge undertaking, right? To set that up, you got to have good instructors. You got to have good assistant instructors. You got to have a good facility that's safe that you can do it in. You know, and you go to some places and it's like, we really can't do live fire here. I know you've done it here in the past, but we cannot do it here, especially if you're a company going in and teaching it and you, right? You look at it and you're like, is it worth my company's name right now to do live fire CQB here or whatever, live fire shoot house, whatever you want to call it. So, you know, we should be taking people into those environments, especially if it's a resource that your agency has or a surrounding agency has. It is everybody. And again, Zach in here said it. It shouldn't just be the SWAT guys doing it. It should be patrol doing it. If you have the opportunity to do it and someone has the credentials for it, call up that neighboring agency and see if you can go train there, you know, and see how things change when you go into it. Because it definitely, like you said before, man, when it goes from paint rounds to live bullets, it is a night and day difference, man. Night and day difference of how things happen.
One of the things, I think that's one of the things we can do is like trainers and mentors, like within our groups, is it's like a 3-year-old with a coloring book. Don't get mad at them because they colored out of the lines, right? Don't look at it and go, oh, why did you paint the dog's nose purple? Who fucking cares? Like, who really cares? Like, in the end goal, the job is to get the picture colored. You didn't tell them. I did a talk about this with like a cake, right? If I told you to make me a cake and I said I want it to be 2 layers, I want frosting, and that's all I gave you, you would do your best and you would make me this cake, and I would like, this is a piece of shit. It's not what I wanted. You're like, it's what you fucking told me to make, right? A cake with 2 layers and frosting. I wanted a square one. You're like, you didn't tell me that, right? So we get mad at them because we assume they either know and read our mind, like we act like women. Maybe SWAT guys act like women sometimes. We assume they can read our mind, the new guy, and he somehow magically is going to know what we want him to do or how we would do it, even though we know for a fact that our way isn't the only way or even necessarily the right way. So when they do start to get the concepts and principles, the bigger ones, and they start coloring outside the lines a little bit, but it's still getting what needs to get done, I think we should not crush them down. You know what I mean? You're supposed to go left. Why didn't you go left? And you know in your heart, you're like, it doesn't fucking matter because he went right. Now you go left. But I wanted to go right. Like, I think that's what can happen in rooms sometimes. Senior guy can be like, why'd you go this way? Because he knows, I think he's mad at himself. And I've been this guy. You're mad at yourself because you planned on what you were going to do in the room after the new guy went in. He's supposed to go this way, so you were going to go this way and create a problem with the closet. You're going to see if he picked that up. But he went straight because he hits his corner. He goes, there's nothing fucking there. And interesting. And he sees the closet and he wants to pull up on a short, thinking you're going to come around and just kind of pie off for him. And I've had guys explain that to me. I'm like, well, that's completely fucking logical. But you can get mad at them because they were supposed to do it a certain way. And you're not high speed enough to do it that way yet. When you get some more experience, you can start coloring outside the lines, right? I don't think you need a ton of it. I think you just need to understand what needs to get done. Like, we went through fires, TRT school, mountain rescue, all these things. We learned like the right way to rig up every rescue system on the planet, right? And all the stuff that has to go into it. And then we know that not all of that shit needs to go into it. Like, if we rig a vertical assault and we were practicing rappelling down a building, breaking a window and doing an entry or setting a charge or setting a listening device, there is a right way to set that up in training that is like universally understood, right? Like industry standards. But we also know that there are hasty ways that we can set that up with some pretty janky shit that is your job as the guy that's rigging it to go, I'm pretty sure it's going to work. And like, we got to do it. Like, this is what we have. So you're going to rig it up the best you can, even though it may not look perfect. If you understand it in depth, you know what you can get away with. Like, you know what still has to be met. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah.
Like, the new guys, if they start to understand it earlier and they start doing things that aren't textbook, it's still okay. As long as they understand why they did it. If they're just lost and they're like, I don't know why I did that, well, we have other stuff we probably got to work on.
Yeah, and it's it's that foundation that they get either at the academy level or whatever it is, right? They're just their general interest in trying to understand something, because doing it and understanding it are two different things, right? Just because you can do it doesn't mean you can understand it. If you really truly understand something, you can do it, and then you also have that intimate knowledge of why it is the way that it is and why you can do it that way. If you're one of those people that is more on that side of understanding it, at least from what I've seen, they're usually better performers. If they just solely focus on how to do the thing, there's a ceiling on their performance when it comes to that stuff. But if they become, and I'm not saying you got to become a SME on every single little thing, right? On rigging, you got to be an SME on rigging. But if you have some intimate knowledge of that and have spent some time investing in it, well, then you're that person, like you said, that can, on training day, when we got to have OSHA standards, you can meet that. But when it comes down to do it for real life and you only have 30 seconds to get it done, when in training it takes a minute and a half, but you know how to get it done in 30 seconds, that's the where it starts to change a little bit for it. So at least I start to see guys that are like that at all kind of various levels, whether it's the shooting or looking at building clearing and, moving around spaces differently. If we can get them to ask these questions and look at it differently, I think that only sets them up going forward, just like, than just kind of this blocked out path of doing it, and then like you said, if it becomes a situation where they have to do something by themselves, they're just making decisions and evaluating the environment, the suspect, all that stuff, right? They're evaluating that step by step as they go. So more becomes just decision making in the moment versus kind of this whole crafted CQB thing,
That's
because
yeah, that's my point. Like, you can go in and clear the building textbook. You could do what you could have 100 SMEs and they could all be watching on video and grade it like, yes, that's a perfect opportunity right there to do a slow pie. Yes, I agree. And 75% could agree that. And that's what you did. And they're like, look at that, you're getting good grades. And no one's in there. You just did a great job on it. And then you come through and just walk through it and then kind of peek and poke around and like, oh, there's a guy in that back room. So now you've already located one problem. And then you could come back, pull back to my hallway over here and you go, well, now I need some more people here to deal with him because I can take care of him by myself, but I still got to get him in custody. Now I got all this other problems. Whatever fantasy has to be made up, right? And everybody could say it's completely wrong, but you've accomplished the exact same end goal, right? You either do it perfect and find a guy who you don't have to shoot, because again, we shoot way too much shit in CQB training, and you can come in and do everything wrong and find the guy. In the end, it doesn't matter. I've told people before, I will clear a building on a burglary call with my gun in my holster. And people are like, that's crazy. I'm like, why the fuck is that crazy? I don't fucking need my gun. I have my hand on my gun. If I'm looking around doing whatever, I have my hand on my gun and I'm pretty confident I can draw and shoot pretty quick and not miss. But why am I walking around with a gun in my hand when I have never cleared a building on a burglary call and shot anybody? I have arrested a lot of people and found a lot of people inside of houses. But the gun, outside of being a whoopee, in my old age now, it just seems to be overused and complicate matters. It's part of it. It's a necessary thing. It's a tool, but the idea of like, oh, I got to hold my handgun a certain way and I have to move a certain way to give myself an advantage, I think is false. I don't think you're giving yourself an advantage unless you are going bangs and full speed. I don't think you're getting an advantage over the bad guy. I think sometimes just walking around calmly gives you an advantage, and just walking around and then, oh, there they are. Like if you had to go kill a bunch of people in a house, just walk.
Yeah, it's that's the one element. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's hard to tell people sometimes, look, you're going to be on the reactive side of this whole thing, right? And because we have to, because we're law enforcement, just like you said, we can't walk through and as soon as we see a shadow, we dump an entire mag at that shadow on the burglary call. We just can't do it. So you're like, it would be great for us to be on the initiating side of that reaction, but most of the time we're on the reactionary side, right? Even with night vision and all this other awesome shit that we have, drones and everything else, thermal, all this other stuff, there's still times where we're on the reactionary side of this. So the patrol officer in that situation, clearing the building, you could do everything. You could walk through there with your gun up in your face on your sight the entire time. You're still going to be on the reactionary side of it because this is law enforcement in the United States, and there's laws and case law and all these other things that are put in place, department policy, right? That officers have to follow when it comes to these things. And it's tough to look at, right? It's like you might be shot in order to be right. You might have to wait for someone to shoot at you in order to be right versus making the wrong decision and then having to live with it on that side. That's the whole not being able to shoot thing, right?
Yeah. The mistake of fact shootings go through the roof when guys are not confident and living inside of that gun. It's a protective plastic Jesus force field in front of their face. And when the fucking mouse farts, if those things happen, those mistake of fact shootings go up. And do not freaking go pissy with me in the comments about, you don't know what it's like. Yes, we do. So that same point, right? Like I would never tell guys in training, patrol officers that were training to clear a location. I would never tell them, don't do it with your gun out. If you're the sixth in our agency, they're going to have they've had upwards of 15 fucking guys go to clear a building, right? If you're standing in the back with nothing to do, Put your gun away. Be useful. Like, when I just think the addition of it in people's hands sucks some of their fucking IQ out. Like, I don't know if they use that IQ used to charge the red dot or what, but it sucks some of their IQ out once they put that thing in their hand if they're not super confident with it. The idea of entering this is specific to like a burglary alarm call that's been holding for 45 minutes. If you're entering on a search warrant, I'm not saying don't have your gun out. I am saying don't have it up in front of your face and be pointing it at everybody, right? If you're on an active shooter or you're doing a crisis entry or a hostage rescue, it's probably a good idea to have your gun out. What? I don't know. That's just going to be that's a tangent for another day.
Well, and even on those though, the more higher end ones, where it's like there is a suspect,
Mm-hmm.
they are armed and dangerous, they're posing a threat and have made a threat and have access to hurt an innocent person that they're holding against their will and all that stuff. I mean, dude, still at the end of the day, going to these trainings, listening to debriefs, listening to just trying to gain knowledge on this stuff, you could do everything right and still be on the reactionary side of that.
Absolutely.
You know, like the coulda, shoulda, woulda stuff. Like I've had numerous occasions where I'm like, I could have done this. But at that moment that it happened, I wasn't sure, right? And that's one of the guys that I learned from. He talked about that rule, be sure of your target. And he spent about 20 minutes talking about what sure meant. So if I'm in a situation and I don't meet that level of what sure actually means, be sure of your target from the legal standpoint, right? Let's make it a Arizona revised statute thing. If I'm not there for that, can I shoot? Yep. Right? Yep. And, you know, sometimes you have to live with those decisions. And when things happen and you look at them after the fact, you're like, well, man, I looked at it at this point this way, you know, but you weren't to that level yet. Like, again, we could do everything right. And sometimes we are just on the other side of it, you know, after that ball drops. And that's kind of the thing that I think about the most, because who has to deal with those situations the most? It's patrol, right? Because They either don't get enough info or they don't get the right info, which is even worse, right? Like, hey, suspect's wearing a blue shirt. Well, really, he was wearing an orange shirt and he walked by you as you pulled up on scene.
Yep. Oh, they in hindsight, their job's super easy, but in function, their job is incredibly difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to finish on this part, what you were talking about, the sure part. As a brand new young SWAT guy in 2005, when I went through, I think it was your guys' school. So over at your guys' SWAT school for the agency, which people do fail, right?
So you can go through and complete the school. That doesn't mean that you move on in selection.
Right. So that school,
and
our guys are allowed to attend it as well.
Yeah, and we can we have sent people home.
Yep.
for things that you would look at and be like, yep, that person has to go home. We've had people get sent home, and same thing for the hostage rescue school as well.
Yep. So our guys are able to attend your guys' SWAT school too. And I went to it in 2005. And I remember as a young guy, and my ego being very big, there was a scenario we did, or several sets of scenarios we did on like a vehicle assault, right? So they had two actors in the car, windows are rolled down. So before we were putting
newspaper
wrap on them to make windows. Yeah. So they're in the back and we're going to throw our bang across the front and do this old school, old timey assault, right? And we come up in there. Well, the bad guys are in the car. They have the hostage, and the bad guy's arm is right through the hostage's armpit like this. As you come to the window, he's shooting at you. And I shot, boom, 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 and I shoot. And they're like, all right, end scenario. And they're like, you shot the hostage. I'm like, bullshit. And then you look in the car and you're like, oh yeah, you did. Because you didn't take the time to figure out whose fucking arm is that in this tangle of humanity. What does that arm attach to? It's the person shooting at you. But where is the thing you can shoot to actually stop? And it wasn't there. It's just a victim in the front seat. I think her arms are out like, to her sides, and she's all the way leaned across the suspect. His head everything is behind her, and his arm is sticking out behind her body, firing at you through the window, just blind as hell shooting. But all you see is the arm, boom, boom, boom. Didn't take the moment to go, okay, that I don't have a shot and get out of the way, or stand there and be like, what? I guess I got to figure this out. But 100%, I learned that lesson in your guys' school. And I was was all beside myself with like, that's not fair. And that, right? That's not fair.
Yeah.
That's stupid. That would never happen. No, it does happen.
Yeah.
It is absolutely fair. It did happen. I love that one too. If this was real, I wouldn't have done this. Well, it's fucking real, and that's what you did. So,
And it's not fair sometimes, right? And it's, how do we deal with that not being fair part? And at what point I would tell anybody, like, hey, think about that when you're going up to whatever situation with it, that it's CQB or not, right? Whatever it is that you're dealing with, like, at what point or what part of this is not fair to me, right? And again, just being in law enforcement, the decisions that we have to make and the things that we have to do these days, right? The pressure on us to make the right decisions in a moment. This is the nature of it right now. So, guys need to be really aware of that,
And I think it goes to everybody else, the armed citizen. The Constitution of the United States protects your lawful use of deadly force against someone else's unlawful use of certain types of force. In the end, what you have to understand is, what are you justified in doing, like legally? Clearly try to get the best understanding of it that you can. Is what can you actually do legally? You can beat the shit out of people for a lot of things you cannot shoot them for. All right? Cannot shoot them for. Once you have an understanding of that, it's then just applying it to whatever the situation is. There is no such thing as magical tactics that only deal with cars and only deal with bedrooms and only deal with giant office space and only deal with exteriors and only deal with plain fields and jungles, right? The overall principles and concepts are pretty much the same everywhere. You got to find the bad guy. You got to be able to identify what it is, and you have to decide on whether or not you're going to shoot it. Now, the techniques and the things that you can do to find, to simplify those are varied just because the venues are different and the environments are different, right? Open flat field of wheatgrass in the daytime is different than open flat field of wheatgrass in the nighttime when it is pitch black. It's just different. I don't care what tech you have. It's still, now you're using tech. Now you're using lights. Now you're doing whatever. So be like all of that. It's like you don't have daytime open area search tactics school and then nighttime open area tactics search, because the fucking tactics, the main part's the same. Now we're just doing shit in the dark. So how about just getting good at doing shit in the dark all over the place and applying it to whatever, new venue or environment that you're in. And in the end, the suspect or the subject's going to decide how you get to deal with it.
Right. And once they change, they run out of that field and run into a Wendy's. Yep. Then what do we do, right? Like, do we have a school for how to deal with someone inside of a Wendy's? I don't know. Maybe that's the next thing, right?
I think they've got Burger King and Taco Bell down. It's $1,800 a day. It does have a catered lunch if you'd like to go. It's all dry fire. Go on. But dude, we're going to close it up. I appreciate you getting on. This is just two dudes talking about, like, what is it that the world wants to know? Why do certain classes get named what they are? And do they really teach you at the end of it as a student? Do you feel like you had a solid grasp of what you need to do and you could go and implement it right away? And just like shooting, did you take that information and continue to train with it? Do you spend your normal days in observing your environment and looking at what side of the hinge, what side of the door the hinges are on? Do you look at construction? Do you walk through the store and think about this, this shelf pop out right here is really just filled with Lay's potato chips and it is not ballistic at all, but it might be something I could hide behind. Like little dumb shit like that. Do you start to look at your environment for how would you deal with it in that environment? That's just what I want people to think about. You don't need a magic class for it, but
definitely do those things. And if people are wanting to know, especially the law enforcement people, like what are ways to train that or how to incorporate that stuff, that can be another one as well of different things to do it, because obviously everyone's being tasked with training, and helping people get better. Or if you're actively being involved in getting people better at your agency, that might be something worth discussing too down the road.
Absolutely. Well, let's wrap it up. I got a 40-hour 40mm school to do all of next week.
Awesome.
I'm shooting. You shooting at Rio tomorrow?
No, I shot this morning.
I saw that.
That's
right,
fine.
man, we're gonna close
it.
It was a
good time.
I'll catch you guys later. See ya.